Podcasting from Portland East to Portland West, from Big Pine Key to Pacific Beach, and from San Juan to Guam, this is All Across America.
Erica, it's a pleasure. It's an honor. Welcome to All Across America, and super excited to have you on the show. And I think one of the things that makes you such a good doctor and good at what you do as a family practice physician is that you had such a long and varied career before becoming a physician. And you've had a long family history. You're a third generation doctor, but you've learned and were familiar with both traditional Native American medicine and then also homeopathic medicine. So maybe we could begin with what I thought was one of the more riveting stories was how you spent a month with your Uncle Ernst, or I should say Dr. Bauer.
Hair Doctor Bauer. Yeah, Hair Dr. Bauer. So I'll tell you about that. That's in book number 2. I'm just telling your audience. Memoir 2 is called From Mountains to Medicine, Scaling the Heights in Search of My Calling. And it's all about my 10-year journey on finding what I was really here on this earth for. And I knew that I had a purpose, but I had no idea what it was. And so I, in my searching around, trying to look at different things, I went to visit my uncle, who was actually a famous alternative doctor. He was trained in mainstream medicine, and then he got really discouraged, and he looked at his father, who is also a doctor. I'm third generation doctor, and but that's not why I went into medicine. I want that to be clear. I found it on my own, and so I wanted to find out about him because my father said that he was a quack, and my mother said that he was a genius. So I had the idea that I was going to be the one who decided what he really was. And so I went with the idea that it was after graduating from college that I was going to be like an investigative journalist. I was going to take notes and interview him and everything. And that never happened. So he met me at the train station in Switzerland, and he was very odd. He's very eccentric. I found out later why he was so eccentric. He and my mother had a very cruel upbringing. The father, the one who's a doctor, was a very loving, kind, compassionate man, but he was never around. And so the mother, who was very lovely, died in childbirth. And so they were almost like orphans. So the town insisted that he get a wife, so because it wasn't proper to have these children without mothers. So one guy offered his 18-year-old daughter to be a stepmother, or 19 or something. And she didn't want to be a mother. She was quite mean to the children, and she died of Spanish flu. And then they had another mother and a stepmother, and this mother really hated being a mother and was extremely cruel to the children, which explains a lot of some of my mother's behavior, but especially Uncle Ernst's behavior. He was so awkward around people, and yet he had such a huge heart. I discovered he was so kind and generous and compassionate. But when I first met him, I thought, gosh, he's so strange. And so and he's so stiff. He's so stiff, like just being around somebody made him tense. And so he said to me when I got there, he said, and he's multilingual. I'm too, but so he said, I've forgotten what language. He said, your fast has begun today. I said, what? Fast. And then I asked him to say it in each different language to make sure I understood. It meant no eating for 2 weeks. And I said, why do I have to do that? And aren't I going to die from not eat? This was 1970. People didn't know much in America about fasting. And And he said, no, this is how he cures a lot of these terminal cases. I mean, that's one of the things he uses. And because he was getting people from all over Europe and even from Russia and a few from the United States. And they all were, quote, hopeless cases, meaning they were going to die of cancer and stuff. And he was able to turn them around with his odd methods. And so I said, well, why do I have to do it? I'm not sick, And he said, because you're toxic. And I said, toxic? We didn't use that word much back then, and it was only like oil spills and stuff like that.
Right.
I said, I'm not toxic. I said, how do you know I'm toxic? And he said, well, you're American. I said, well, what does that have to do with it? And he said, well, you eat unhealthy food. This was 1970. You eat unhealthy food and you use a lot of chemicals in your day-to-day. I, I, I thought, I have got to get out of here. This guy is crazy. My father's right. He's a quack. He's a lunatic. I'm gonna escape. I'm gonna crawl out the window and go back and get the train and go home. And so, but then I was intrigued. I started talking with his patients, and they said he's a total genius. They said there's no other doctor like him, and I should be proud of him. And they're very excited for me, and so forth. And anyway, so I decided, well, maybe I'll escape after 1 day or 2 days. I want to see a little bit more about this. And what happened was, um, most people feel terrible when they fast. But something really weird happened to me. I started feeling really good. In fact, on day 4, I felt like I was in a completely altered state in a good way. I felt all those things that people in college talked about who took LSD. They talked about the oneness and we're all one. And I just thought it was words. It didn't mean anything to me. And then I realized I, I'm experiencing that, but not from LSD, from starvation. And,
Okay.
and so, and so I thought, I think I'm going to stick this out. But the investigative reporting didn't really work out with him because he was so awkward and shy. So I interviewed his patients, and they told me one amazing story, and I documented all of it. Um, and after the 2 weeks, when we started eating a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, I felt better than I had in my whole life. And I asked him, why do I feel so good? Most people, when they don't, eat for so long, they feel horrible. And he said, well, this is a sign that you have some allergies and probably to dairy. I said, how do you know that? How do you know I'm allergic to dairy? And he said, well, you came with rings under your eyes. You had all the signs of it. You're puffy and so forth. And sure enough, it turns out I was allergic, but how could I know?
Wow.
Because when you're a fish in water, how do you know you're in water, right? And so how did I know?
Right.
Because I had it every day. And so it was life-changing. And then um, I was only 21, and some of the patients asked me if I was going to come back and train to be a doctor with my uncle. And I remember saying clearly, in fact, I put everything in my diary, so I have a good description of what happened. I didn't have to try and remember all that stuff. It was all written in my diary. And they asked me, so was I going to become a doctor? And I said, no, I'm not a genius. My, Uncle Herr Dr. Bauer is definitely a genius, and I know I'm not a genius. And he was the only doctor I knew because I didn't have any health problems. Maybe I got vaccinated once or something, but I didn't see doctors. And So he was my only role model of what a doctor is, and I knew that I'd never reach his level. So I never considered, even though it's in my DNA, and on the Swiss side, I never considered that I would be worthy of being a doctor. I mean, the crazy ideas that we make in our heads are just, I look back and I think, God, gee, I got some very weird ideas. And that's from growing up with, harsh criticism and stuff like that constantly. You know, my mother was pretty harsh, probably because she was treated so atrociously, but so compared to the way she was treated, she did a really good job. But
Yeah.
it wasn't, oh, you're doing great. You're so I didn't have, I didn't have any ideas about myself doing great things. Do you know what I mean?
And it's it's amazing that you were at 29 and saying, "Oh my goodness, I've been 10 years. I'm too old to ever become a doctor." Do you look back on that and say, "What was I thinking? I was so young."
Exactly. Oh my God. And I think, I bet lots of people have these crazy ideas that are just nearly insane. I bet I'm not the only one who has these terrible views of themselves and limiting views and stuff like that. And but then years later, when I decided I wanted to take some science courses as a 29-year-old in Boulder, Colorado, because I actually tested out. See, I was smart and didn't know it. I tested out of all my science requirements, math, all that stuff at college, because Antioch was, quote, progressive. And I sort of regret that I tested out because, so I thought I'm going to get up to date on all these subjects because I had them in Germany. I had a really good education in Germany, and that's where I was in high school. So I decided I'm going to take these advanced placement courses, and everybody in the class was 10 years younger than me. And I discovered that they all, except for me, were pre-med. I thought, oh my God, these people are future doctors? And then boing, an epiphany. You don't, these people are not geniuses, not at all.
Right.
So you don't have to be a genius. And what they're doing is they're memorizing and taking tests that, you just memorize stuff and take a test. They're not, no critical thinking, no saying, is this really true? How do you know this? It's just memorizing. And I thought,
It's very
I
true.
can
Biology is
memorize.
so much memorizing. It
It's
really
just
is.
memorizing and then spitting it back,
Yeah.
memorizing. It's like, where's the brain? Where is it, saying, is this really true? And how does this happen? And why does this happen and this doesn't happen? None of that. None of that.
And it's almost like you became a doctor not because of your family history, but almost in spite of it, in that because your uncle was such a genius in a
Yeah.
way that it was almost a detraction from wanting to do that until you met, I guess, more mere mortals in
Yeah.
pre-med.
Yeah. I said, I can do this. And then I had another little hurdle with the counselor because I thought, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Oh my God, I've gone 10 years. But I didn't regret the 10 years searching because, I would have been going straight to college to medical school and then I wouldn't know anything about life, and
Right, right.
so, and I'd be having patients deal with really serious life problems and I didn't experience anything. So anyway, so I went to the guidance counselor and I said, I found exactly what I want to do with my life. I want to be a doctor. And oh, you do? Yeah. Oh, so he looked at my folder and he said, you've done all these, amazing things. What makes you think you're going to stick with medicine? And I said, well, I found my true purpose in life. That's why I was looking the whole time for what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And he said, well, you've got some things against you, And I said, what things against me? And he said, number one, you didn't have any science courses until this pre-med. And number two, you're too old. Too old? I'm 29. And he said, well, in that era, it was too old because he said, well, you're going to be in your 30s by the time you get in because you got to finish your courses. You got to wait a year and take the MCAT exam.
Over the hill.
Yeah, and then you have to wait to get accepted, and then you'll be in your mid 30s. And so, and they said that's really too old, and you're a woman. And I said, what does that have to do with it? And he said, well, it's harder for women to get in. And it was true, that era, it was
Yeah.
harder. And there were much less women. And number four, I can't remember what number four was like. Oh,
The deck was stacked against you.
it was stacked against me. And so, I'm a rebel. And so when somebody says that, it makes me even more interested. And so it's not a deterrent at all for me. And so I I came back showing him a letter from Stanford asking me for an interview. And he was really shocked, and he apologized for, and I said, never doubt a person on a mission. And
That's right.
they're going to get there somehow, no matter what you say. And I said, your words were supposed to discourage me, and they did the opposite. And he said, I'm really sorry. I said, that's okay. And I just laughed. And 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 then the interview was outrageous. Did you remember how he called and he wanted me to go out there and to Palo Alto for the interview, and I
Very bold of you, I have to say.
it was because you see, I wasn't brought up in that whole cult of pre-med and you do things a certain way and
Right,
play by the
right.
rules. I didn't even know what the rules were. I was just
Right.
being myself. I wasn't, and it was actually, in retrospect, it was absolutely shocking what I did. But so, and everybody else was horrified at what I did. I said, I don't have the money to go. I was in the Peace Corps, and I don't have the money to fly out there and buy a nice suit and all that stuff. And so, could you interview me out here? And then the phone was totally silent after that. I thought, oh, I think I might have said something wrong. Oh, and then I started talking really fast. And I said, well, if you come out here, I could take you on the most amazing trip that you've ever had. It'll be the most amazing interview you've ever had because, we can go skiing to Rocky Mountain National Park, and I have all the gear because I used to be an Outward Bound instructor. You don't have to bring anything except your backpack, your warm clothes, and I have everything, and I'll meet you at the airport. And he said, and I said, and we'll ski in, and we'll sit, it'll be a nice sunny day, and we'll sit on a log, and you can interview me on the log in the snow while we eat our lunch. And so then there was silence. I thought, boy, I've really blown it. And then he said, I'll get back with you. And then I had told all the other I made an announcement. Guess what? I got an offer for an interview at Stanford, and then I told him that I asked if he could come out here, and they were so upset with me. How could you do something so
Yeah.
stupid? And so I said, I'm sorry, I just didn't know how things are supposed to be done. I don't know this culture at all. And so he called back and he said, the advisor said it's okay to come out there. And I said, well, how'd you change your mind? And he said, because you're the most unusual candidate we've ever had. And we're looking for, I don't know if it was 1% or 10%, but a certain percentage, we want people like you who are out of the box. And that's where I learned the expression out of the box. I'm out of the box.
There you go.
And so he came out, and it was exactly the way I described it. We sat on a log. He said, this is the best interview I've ever had. But then he got really serious, and he said, but you're not playing by the rules. You have to finish your studies. But then University of Colorado said, "We want you. You don't have to repeat your MCATs. We know what you did. We understand you're concerned about your age. You just finish your courses and you're in. You're accepted, and we'll give you a scholarship." So that's how that
Mm.
happened. University of
And
Colorado.
part of that, the second half was covered by the United States government. And can you
National
talk a little
Health
bit more?
Service Corps, and that's how I ended up in Cuba, New Mexico. And that was really primitive medicine. Really, really, it was underserved, understaffed. I was doing stuff I had no training in. They put me in a situation where it was just I wasn't trained to be an ER doctor, and I was doing everything. I was delivering babies. I even delivered a breech baby, and nobody does that except for, if you're ready to do a C-section
Right,
with an
right,
OBGYN. I was doing stuff that like I was setting compound fractures. Who I was trained in family practice, earaches and stuff like that. So
right, right,
God, I was so over my head. But the Navajo people, who had been terribly critical against these kind of doctors who come with hardly any training and everything, and they felt like guinea pigs, but they were really, really nice to me because I spoke Navajo, and
right.
I live with their people. And so they watched me do ridiculous things. Like I one time set a fracture while I was reading the orthopedic book how to do it. Can you imagine the poor family watching me do that? But they never criticized me, and they brought me little mutton stew things and little weavings and jewelry and stuff like that. So they were very kind to me.
Wow. And it's still my understanding is that Cuba is still an underserved community
It's
in
still
New Mexico.
underserved, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be. They have a
Yeah,
nice building. It looks
that's
pretty
great.
nice from the outside, but it's always underserved because nobody wants to work there, you know.
And maybe you could tell folks about your first experience with the Navajo people, and even the name Navajo is interesting. The first that I remember hearing that's actually a name that is not their true name. It's derived from the Spanish language.
It's not their true name. That the Spanish gave names to a lot of things that they came and colonized that area. And the real name is Dine, Dine, with an accent, Dine. And the reason why I
Didn't
keep saying Navajo is because back when I was a school teacher there in 1971, 2, and 3, um, nobody used their proper name, Dine. And so but it's the correct thing to do is to address them as Dine. So that's why I call them Navajo, because I'm talking about an era where nobody called them Dene.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And you talked about fasting and that it was almost like a psychedelic experience.
Yeah.
But you also had a similar experience, and you write about how you were involved in multiple peyote ceremonies. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that changed your perspective on
Oh
life? And
gosh, yes. Okay, so um I in college I didn't really um LSD and all that stuff. I tried it, just it wasn't for me. But they were doing it in college, like recreational. So my Navajo families that kind of adopted me, one in particular was a member of the Native American Church, which is the peyote church, and it was legal for them, but not for white people. White people, it was illegal in that era to use
wow,
peyote, and they used it only for religion. And the roadmen, who are sort of like the medicine man, that's what they call them, roadmen, they did not approve of people using peyote recreational. They did not approve it at all because it's a really they took it for religious reasons, for
right,
prayer and healing. And so the Navajo family, this is when I'd only been there for a little while. I just spoke a few words at that time, how old are you? Sit down. Where does your family live? Just not much of anything. And because I'd only been there for about a month at that time or something like that. But this family really adopted me, and they invited me to participate in the peyote ceremony. So I was kind of scared. I didn't know what to think. And they told me could not dress like a white person. I had to dress in their clothing. And so, I mean, I really did the whole thing with the Navajo knot of my hair and the beautiful satin a velvet shirt and satin skirt and the woven belt. I mean, I look like I was ready to go to a Navajo prom or something. I mean, I couldn't stop looking at myself in the mirror. Is that me? so, and so my Navajo mother sat next to me in the peyote ceremony. It's in a circle, and then the roadman sits off to the west side and looks east, and that's where the door is, east, where the sun goes up. And she whispered to me, you don't have to, participate. You can watch and, take the peyote. And so here's what happened. She also said, you might have to throw up, and that's the evil coming out of people. When they throw up, the evil is coming out. And I thought, I don't want them to know I'm evil. And so I was trying to keep from throwing up, so keep swallowing, until but I managed not to throw up somehow, just sheer willpower. I don't want them to know I'm evil. And so but then after everybody had taken it in 3 different forms, in a powder, in a drink, and chewed on the button. Let's see, is that, yeah, powdered. And then came the sacred tobacco, and it went around the room, and you go like this, and then you say a prayer. And because there was a sick baby in there that needed healing, so we prayed for the sick baby, and also for all the Navajo men in Vietnam. It was so sad. There were so many killed. It was awful. And so we prayed earnestly about them. And when my Navajo mother said a prayer, I couldn't understand a word. I mean, initially, and because my Navajo was just beginner, and then she passed it to me, and she whispered, "Just pass it on." And I didn't pass it on. I held it, and I went like this. And then I prayed in Navajo, and I thought, there was like 2 voices inside of me. One voice says, "Oh my God, you're talking Navajo. You're praying in Navajo. You've never heard these. You've never heard these prayers before, and you're saying a prayer you never heard before, and you don't even speak Navajo." And then this other voice said, "No, the peyote is making you think that you did that. This is a hallucination. You didn't really do that. It's impossible." And the voices went back and forth, and this voice said, "Yes, she is. She is doing this. This is real. This is real." No, it's not. And so then I passed it on. And then came the water drum. It's a metal container, has water in there and a stretched hide over it, and it gives this ethereal, otherworldly sound when you pound on it. It's not like any regular drum. It's out of otherworldly. And what you do when it's passed to you, you sing a song, like a prayer song. Hey, ne young yo. And so it's the same thing. The Navajo mother did that, and then she passed it to me and said, "Just pass it on." I didn't just pass it on. I started singing a Navajo song. I started singing a Navajo song I never heard before. And so I don't know. I had those same voices saying, this is more real than real. And the other voice said, no, 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 this is not real. This is not real. And so pass it on. Okay, then I thought, wow, this is totally mind-blowing. And so when it was all over and the sun started to come up, then we walked out and had our eagle feather fans, and we blessed ourselves with the rays of the sun, and we touched our forehead to the ground, and then we went to the nearby cinder block house where the women had stayed up all night preparing a huge feast, and there was a sheet on the ground on the floor of the hogan, and we were sitting there, and they had mutton stew, fry bread, and canned peaches, the usual stuff. And the roadman was sitting at the end of the table to my right. And then all these people who had participated were sitting there. And at some point, the roadman started looking me right in the eyes, and he started talking Navajo. But the peyote had worn off. It worn off completely. I just felt tired. And he started talking and talking, and I felt so uncomfortable because he was looking right into my eyes. I had I had no idea what he was saying. And then I just sort of laughed and said, I don't speak Navajo. And everybody burst out laughing. And he said, you sure talked up a storm last night. And I said,
Wow.
you mean it really happened? You betcha. I said, oh my
Wow.
God. Oh my
Wow.
God. And so I saw things that I can't explain. And I had my own healing thing of looked like a cancerous tumor. I mean, it wasn't biopsied. I went to the White Hospital about an hour away. And when he said we were going to do a biopsy, it might be cancer, I did what my patients often do, freak out and leave the
Of
hospital.
course. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, so they had a peyote ceremony. And at some point, I went like this, and the thing was gone. And to this day, this is like 55 years later, I still go like this. It's like, I can't believe it. It just went away. It was a hard knot, a lymph node, like lymphoma or something. And so anyway, I was giving a reading. This was like when the book came out 5 years ago. I was giving a reading. It was jam-packed with people from, a lot of them were my patients, but there's some scientists from Los Alamos who were my patients who came. The room was just jam-packed. It was in a bookstore. And at one point, when I was telling these stories, somebody said, how do you explain what you experienced? And I said, well, you want to know the truth? And they said, yeah, give us the truth. And I said, I don't know. And that's the truth. And then this guy from Los Alamos Labs, a physicist, I said, do you have something to say? And he stood up and he said, I can explain what happened to you. Okay. Okay. He said, he said he's a quantum physicist. You know what you've heard that term, quantum physicist. Yeah. Okay. And he says, in our way of seeing the world, and it's based on science, it's not just something they dreamed up, that everything is present in the past, present, and future. It's all there, accessible, but we can't access it. Why? Because when we're babies, our neurons got kind of clipped so that we could, focus, on us, have our world be manageable and not like everything happening at once. It would make you go insane. And so there's pruning right from the start. When you're born, there's pruning going on, and so so your world is more manageable. Right. And he said that the peyote got you out of the box. I thought I was already out of the box. He said I was out of the box to Stanford people, but apparently I was not out of the box. but the physicist said the peyote allowed you to get out of our limited reality. I thought, geez, that's actually believable.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I've been learning about universal consciousness and that there is more to who we are as humans. There's a really good podcast that's out. It was the number one podcast in the United States called the Telepathy Tapes. And it talks about the experience of nonverbal autistic children and also adults. And they cannot speak as normal human beings can, but they're able to access, essentially to be able to communicate telepathically, and they're able to access a realm of consciousness that we as ordinary human beings cannot. And in some respects, why they like to be in their own world is that, as you're explaining it, there's just so much noise that they see because they experience so much more. It's a lot to absorb. It's a 10 episode series, but it helped me see things, I think, in a different way that allowed me to understand. And it all seems very similar to what these nonverbal autistic folks see, to people who try LSD or psychedelic mushrooms, or as you're experiencing this Native American ceremony, or even Buddhist meditation. I think they all bring people to a different plane that's beyond what we typically know as humans.
Yeah, and we're so in cahoots with that this is our real reality, this little box we're in,
Yeah.
that it's hard to, and I mean, even imagine that this is only a small part of reality, what we're experiencing.
Yeah, yeah. And so how have you been able to reconcile that? I mean, your uncle called it school book medicine, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
went to University of Colorado and you have an MD degree, but as we touched upon earlier, you've got a lot of experience in homeopathic
yeah.
medicine and of course the Native American traditions. How does that all come together in your
Okay,
practice?
so that's book three, and I'll tell you, I'm on page 200 of writing, and so I've got
Okay.
another
All right.
100
So it's not
pages
out
to go.
yet.
No, but I can
Let's hear
tell
it.
you. So gradually, I said I got disenchanted, but I wanted to excel. So in order to do that, I did something bad to my soul. I put my soul in a little box and went completely along with the agenda, adopted it, what everybody else was doing, and just didn't pay attention to the little voice that said, "This is not your path. This is not real
Mm,
healing. This is not
okay.
healing." It's dealing with symptoms, and I mean, there's some areas that are great, like surgery and stuff like that, but
Sure.
the
Yeah.
chronic illness stuff is a disaster. And I,
Yeah.
I I shut out that voice. I just didn't listen to it, and I paid a terrible price because I was practicing medicine in a way that really wasn't my calling in life, to just
Yeah.
give out pills, do a lot of tests, talk to a person for 15 minutes. I mean, I was living a lie, a
Yeah.
complete lie. And, I got a great salary and people thought highly of me and stuff, but my soul was dead. And,
Yeah.
but then something, disaster happened. And it seems like every disaster in my life has been a godsend. Like the breakdown in college, if I hadn't had a breakdown in college and been forced to see that unusual psychiatrist, I don't think I'd have ever found my real self, what I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
doing. I mean, so my motto is never waste a bad experience. And I tell my patients that when they
I like
come in
that.
total distress, I said, look, this is going to sound hollow to you, but someday you're going to use all this, whether it's to be a health coach or to find your calling in life or to restructure your life so it's more in alignment with what's right and good and healthy and feeds your soul, and not eat this terrible American food and from corporations. And because you'll feel bad enough, you're willing to make these changes because you're stripped. You've lost your job because you're so sick and your families don't understand what's wrong with you. You can use this as an opportunity to rebuild your life in alignment with your soul's calling. And so I mean, that's my story too. And
Yeah.
so here's what happened. So when I was a single mom, and he was the baby that was prayed for in the peyote ceremony. Do you remember that?
Yes.
A
Yes.
baby, a land, a house, and a husband in that order, and that's the order it happened in. And so, that was their thank you present for me helping them in their uh, clinic when I was in Cuba, New Mexico. So this was the boy that was prayed for, and the father really, we weren't meant to be partners, but we tried and we weren't
Yeah.
suited for each other. So I raised my son by myself, um and so being a single parent and being a doctor is really hard. So I made another deal with the devil. So I went to work in with corporate medicine, which was really terrible. So I could get out at 5 o'clock, pick up my son, no delivering babies all night, no weekends, and that's the only way. I didn't know what else to do because
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise I'd have to go on welfare and not work and stuff. So this is what I did. And then I started feeling really weird from day one. And it wasn't just because I was practicing bad medicine. There's something going on with my body. And it got worse and worse and worse. And I noticed that everybody was complaining about different symptoms, that everybody had something wrong with them there, the nurses and the doctors. But I seemed to be hit the hardest.
Hmm.
And because of where I was located next to the procedure room where they used all these nasty chemicals to
Oh.
disinfect. And the janitor, oh, it was terrible. I didn't know anything about environmental medicine at the time. I was
Sure.
equally ignorant as Joe Blow off the street.
Yeah.
And all the doctors were ignorant about toxins and stuff like that. And I got sicker and sicker and sicker. And then when it affected my brain, I thought, oh, geez, I'm really in trouble. It's like I have dementia or something. And I thought, I have to figure out what the hell is wrong with me. And I was just hanging in there, like how athletes, they just keep going even though they're half dead. Well, that
Right.
I'm a
Right.
former athlete, and
Right.
as you discovered, and I just kept
Yes.
going there like a good Swiss, mountaineer and stuff, and getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And finally, what really woke me up is a patient came in, and he had all sorts of sensitivities and allergies. And like I said, doctors didn't know a thing about that thing. And he was sitting there in this little room with no windows. It was horrible and very cramped. And I was at my little desk listening to him. And I realized I couldn't really track what he was saying because my brain
Oh my
damaged.
goodness.
And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, he stopped talking. And I got really scared. He looked me right in the eye. And he was the first person that really saw that something was really wrong with me because I look normal. People with
Yeah.
these things, they look normal, but they're not normal. And he said, Dr. Elliott, what's wrong? And I felt like, oh God, I've been caught. And then I was so shocked that I was being seen that I lost all my defenses. And I just put my hands down and I started to sob. And it was all that pent up feelings that I was trying to hide. And I cried and
Wow.
cried. And he put his chair next to me, put his arm around me, and he said, what's wrong? And I said, I am I think I'm dying or something. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't think straight and I have rashes and I'm tired all the time and I don't know myself
Right.
anymore. I don't know what's happening to me. I'm so scared. And he said, I can tell you what's happening to you. I said, how do you know? And he said, it's this building. I said, well, how do you know that? How do you know that? And he said, I feel like shit every time I come in here. My throat gets sore. I get a headache. This is a
Oh.
toxic building, and it's a new building, so it's outgassing. All these terms were new to me. Outgassing,
Right.
all these fumes. This was so many years ago where people didn't know anything about that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was 1991 or something. And he said, you need to get out of here. And he said, I'm going to make an appointment for myself for a week to check on you. He said, and I'm going to bring you a book. I said, no, I can't even read. I mean, I can read, but then I don't even remember what I read.
Wow.
I said,
And this was a patient. You were the doctor
I
and he
know.
was the
Yeah, yeah,
patient,
yeah.
but
He
the
saved
roles
me.
reversed.
He saved me. He saved me. And
Wow.
so he came back with this book and he said, I understand your brain is you can't read, but look, you put it next to your bed and just touch it and know that there is a doctor who knows exactly what you have. She's in New York, and I know you
Okay.
can't go see her, but just know that you're not alone. You're not alone. And it even has a name, what you have. I said, what's the name? And back then they called it environmental illness, or sick, he said sick building. You have sick building syndrome. He said, this
Okay.
is a very toxic building. And it turned out I had a diary, and every month it looked like I had the flu with no fever. And that turned out because they were spraying pesticide, disgusting
Oh,
pesticide that's banned now because it's known to cause brain damage, especially in children.
wow. Okay.
And it's called Dursban, chlorpyrifos. And
Yes.
so anyway, he said, you have to leave here. I said, but how will I make a living? He said, if you don't, you're going to end up dead. And then who cares about making a living?
Right.
And so he said, you'll figure it out. And so I went up to my supervisor and I said, oh, here's the last straw. Here's what really made me realize, oh my God, I have to quit, or I'm going to end up hurting somebody. So there's this woman who came in, and again, it's claustrophobic little room. She sat on the examining table, and I said, how can I help you? And she started talking, and I understood each word, but I couldn't string it together. So I had no idea what she was saying. And I looked her right in the eyes like this and said, uh-huh, mm-hmm. And then she said, oh, are we done? And I said, well, are you done? And she said, I don't even know what she said. She said, yes, when should I come back and see you? And I said, oh, well, ask my nurse, she'll tell you, okay? Because
Right.
my nurse knew what was happening. I confided in her, and she felt like
Yeah.
shit too. But I was
Ooh.
the worst hit the
Wow.
worst. And so then she goes to the door and she stops and turns around, and I think, uh-oh, I'm caught. And she looks right in my eyes and said, Dr. Elliott, you're the best doctor I've ever had. I said, what, why do you say that? And she said, you're the first doctor that's really listened to me and taken me seriously. I thought, oh my God. And so that's when I quit.
Wow.
Because I was just a sham. I mean, and so when I went to the supervisor, I told him I was going to quit because the building was making me sick. And he said, well, we can send you to another building. There's this corporation has several clinics in Albuquerque and Santa Fe. And I said, well, they're all gonna. I'm so damaged. There, he said, you look very healthy. I think it's in your imagination. I said, Dr. Lawless, that was his name, Lawless. I said, Dr. Lawless, I might look healthy. I'm not healthy. I'm so sick. And he said, but why do you want to quit? And I said, because I'm afraid I'm going to hurt somebody. I'm a hurt patient, or write the
Right.
wrong prescription or something, do something harmful. And he said, do you know what? Let me tell you something. Out of all the clinics that are under our supervision, you are the only one that does not have a single complaint against them. And I thought, oh my God, this is a lunatic asylum. And so I did quit, and then I just cried and cried on the couch thinking, I'm going to be a bag lady. I can't support my son. I won't be able to pay the mortgage on this house. I'm a total mess. And then after 3 days of crying on the couch, when I had to pick up my son, then of course I would not do that because it'd be traumatic to him. But on the third day, there was a knock on the door at my house, and I opened the door, and I was really confused because that person looked familiar, but I didn't. And she said, "Dr. Elliott, can I come in?" I said, "Well," she said, "Remember me? I was your patient." I said, "How'd you find my house?" She said, "Well, I asked people how to find you." And I said, "Well," I was really, I said, "Well, why do you want to come in?" She said, "I'd like an appointment with you." I said, I'm very honest person. I don't pretend like some people. I say it like it is. I said, "I'm brain damaged." Uh, you know, and she said, "Oh, we all know that. The nurse told all of your patients." I said, "Oh, well, you want an appointment with me in my house?" And she said, "Yes, please let me in." I just thought, "Oh my God, I don't get it. I'm so confused." And so I let her in. She walked straight to the living room, sat down on the couch, and I sat catty-cornered on another couch. And I did what I did with the other patient. I made total eye contact with her, and she talked and talked, and I understood each word and could not string it together. And my heart was beating so fast because it was like, this an appointment, and I'm so damaged. And all of a sudden she said, "Is our time up?" Uh, I said, "Well, are you done?" And she said, "Yes, how much do I owe you?" And I said, I really, I didn't do anything." She said the same thing the other person said. She said, "Here's $100 bill. And you've been really helpful to me. I know your brain's damaged, but you listened to me, and I could feel your compassion, and I've never felt that by any doctor. And I'm going to pay you, and I'm going to tell my friends about you." "No, don't, please. I'm not capable of practicing medicine." And she said, "Well, you just treat them the way you treated me." And I said, "Well, I need to heal myself." And she said, "Well, we'll all heal along with you," because she said, "I have what you have. I have what I understand you." And there's no doctor that understands us. They think we're crazy, and or need a psychiatrist. They don't get it that we've been injured by these horrible chemicals. And and um and so then I started studying environmental medicine. I had to start really slow, and I had a non-toxic house built for me, and so that's when my real healing began, and it changed my entire life. At some point I thought, "Oh my God, I'm on my path in life. This is it. This is my path." And pretty soon, it took me 5 years to rehabilitate myself. I was seeing patients all along because they
Yeah.
insisted, but I
Wow.
wasn't truly rehabilitated, with the brain and everything for about 5 years till I was really top notch. I was better than I even was before because I was eating a perfect diet. I was sauning. I was exercising in the mountains. I was getting sunshine. I was healthier than before I got injured. And so I would always share everything. And pretty soon I had more patients than I could handle. And then it started expanding from environmental stuff to much broader stuff. People would come for medical mysteries, and that's book 4. And these are people who've been to all these specialists. Some are extremely wealthy, they've been to the best, and they couldn't get answers, and for this and that and so on. And so I ended up with, I never advertised once. It was all word of mouth. I get patients from all over the country, and they're all people who couldn't find help. And I'm going to give you one example, Marco, and
Please.
you'll see it'll be really clear. Okay, this one guy was a businessman. He's very wealthy, and he started feeling really bad. So he had a list of about 20 symptoms, and he went to like 15 doctors, and he went to the best. He's very wealthy. He could pick, and pay out of pocket and stuff like that. And nobody could help him. He got worse and worse, and they gave him a pill for every symptom. And he just said, this isn't helping me. So his mom said there's this doctor who in Santa Fe who really likes to um, figure out the underlying cause instead of just treating symptoms. That's her passion. And so he came to me. No, the patient in those days had to come physically one time, and then I could do it all over the phone. So now I don't take new patients anymore, but I stopped doing that because I can tell a lot just from listening to them, and on
Really?
the phone I tell an awful lot. And
Wow.
so I didn't need to see them in person. I get their vibe. I can almost imagine them sitting in the room next to me. And so he came, and in 10 minutes I solved the problem. And it's not because I'm a genius. It's because I did what most doctors are supposed to be doing. I talked to the patient.
Yeah.
I didn't just throw symptoms, medicines for symptoms. I talked to him, and this is what I did. I do this with all the medical mysteries. I have a timeline, and I ask them to prepare ahead of time to think about, and to write up a write-up of how their symptoms began, when they got really bad, what made them worse, what made them better, and what was different. Because I say everything happens for a reason. We don't just say, oh, why did it happen? And so this is really literally what happened. So he gave me the thing he wrote up. That saves time and money and helps me. It helps him,
Right.
and it helps me. And because they've done most of the work themselves. And
Right.
so he handed it to me. And so I said, okay, that's a timeline. Okay. So it was approximately the winter of 2018 or something like that. And he said, yeah. He said it was somewhere around there. And I said, well, what were your early symptoms? He said, well, I just felt brain fog, and I felt tired. Um, but I just muscled through it. But then it got worse and worse, and I got rashes and stuff. And I said, okay, now what was different in that winter? And they all say the same thing. They say nothing. I said,
Nothing.
okay,
Right.
we're going to sit here, and I'm going to ask you, did you travel abroad? Nope. Did you change your diet? Nope. Did you have emotional problems, girlfriend, money? No. Um, let's see. Are you sure you can't remember something? No. And then I'm thinking, well, did you move someplace? Oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I did. I moved to a townhouse in San Francisco. Oh, is that when things started? He said, well, actually, now that you mention it, yeah, I think that's when it started.
Wow.
And it got worse and worse, right? Yeah. And I said, was was there any water damage in the house? He said, well, how would I know that? And I said, well, there's stains and buckling of the paint and kind of odd color around the windowsill or under in the bathroom and stuff. He said, oh, yeah, it's all over the place. I said, Wyatt, you have mold poisoning.
Mold.
Mycotoxic poisoning are toxins. They're deadly toxins. You need to get out of there, buy a Sprinter van or something till you can figure out where to live that's non-toxic.
Wow.
And we're going to take the long journey to get well. It's not fast because you've been in there all those years
Yeah.
and you're really sick, but it's an opportunity for you to completely change the way you live for the better. And it's going to be like this: 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, one. It's not like that. it doesn't work like that. Anyway, I got the answer in 10 minutes, Mark.
Wow.
10 minutes. 10
Wow.
minutes.
Wow. And
So,
so
so
you were
what, Mark, what it is, it's not that I'm a genius. What it is, okay, my sister said that in book 4, I must not preach. I must show because that turns off the reader. She said, you show the reader what you did, and it'll become totally apparent how terrible our medical system is. You don't have to preach. You don't have to say how terrible. Don't go there because it'll turn readers off. Just you make them discover, like, oh my God.
yes, show, don't tell.
Yeah. She said, I know you're tempted. Don't do it. She said,
And so when you treat, and my understanding is a lot of your practice is people like this patient that you described that are suffering from chronic illnesses. What mold, of course, is top of the list. What are other instigators? What have you seen repeating?
Lyme disease that hasn't been diagnosed.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and because it mimics other illnesses. So
Wow.
if you have, there's certain things you do if you can't figure it out. You know, Lyme disease is very hard to figure out, and
Right.
the tests until recently were just not very adequate. So but it has to be on your list of things that you try to look into when the answer isn't immediate. You think about Lyme disease, like even people who've had, you know, bizarre symptoms. Just think about Lyme. Chronic Lyme is very hard to treat. If you get bitten, by the way, by a tick and it makes like a little rash, if you take antibiotics immediately, you're done, like doxycycline. But if you don't, and you have a bite and you're not aware of it, then it's like hell getting rid of it. It's hell because
Yeah.
they hide under the radar. But if you get it right away before it has time to hide. So I'm not big into antibiotics, but sometimes when I'm not sure of the rash and I will do doxycycline because if it is Lyme and I don't treat it
Too
the right
risky.
way, their life is going to be hell.
Wow. Okay. And then maybe you could talk a little bit about. I'd like to hear you mention earlier about your diet and about your purpose-built home. Could you talk a little bit
Oh
about both
yeah.
of those?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you about my home. So, when I was sick and realized what's wrong with me I realized that the first thing I needed to get well was living in a non-toxic place. And so I was right in the middle of joining a co-housing community. I was one of the founders. In fact, you can
Okay.
look at the TED Talk I gave about, helping found this co-housing community, which I love, and I've been there
And
since
the name of it is in Santa Fe?
the Commons, the
The
Commons on
Commons.
the Alameda. But the TED Talk, just put TEDx ABQ for Albuquerque, comma, co-housing, comma, Erica Elliott, and it'll tell you all about it. It's a 9-minute talk. And anyway, so I wanted to join it because I was a single parent. It's a nice way to get support and stuff like that. But it's a time when I was really injured, and but I had the architect, and she was already starting to build it. But then I realized, oh my God, it might end up being toxic like the clinic because that was a new building
Right.
too. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to go from the frying pan to the fire. And so I told the architect, stop. And there's this one book. It was the only book at the time. Now there's lots of books on. It was the only book called something like Building a Healthy Home or something like that. I
Yeah.
said, would you read it? And she said, I'm too busy. I said, then I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to drop you because I can't afford a toxic house. And she didn't know what I was talking, a toxic house. And,
Right.
and so I said, I'm going to try to find somebody who'll read this book and follow this. And, um, she called me 3 days later and she said, um, I read the book. I said, oh, what made you change your mind? She said, I don't know. I had this feeling that someday we're going to work together. I don't know where that came from, but it's just a feeling I had. Really? You had that we're going to work together? She said, yeah, and it's something big. Really? And I said, okay. So I said, will you promise to completely follow the guidelines in the book? We've gone so much farther than this book, but that's all we had is this book then.
Yeah.
But it was good enough for me, like not using plywood, not using synthetic carpeting, not,
Mm,
it was the basics basically. Now
yeah.
you can take it to much higher
Sure.
level, but it was good enough for me, and that's where my healing began. And she ended up being one of my patients because and neighbor, and she said that she was tired all the time and she had these recurrent pneumonias and bronchitis. And so I took a proper history and I said, Paula, I I hate to break it to you, but you have what I have. She said, no, no, no. I said, I'm sorry, but you do because you are around all these beautiful buildings that you create that are totally poisonous, totally toxic. And it's the formaldehyde that is destroying your mucous membranes. You've got chronic sinusitis, chronic bronchitis, chronic sore throat. That's the formaldehyde that's outgassing from all those things. You see, I'd already learned some environmental medicine, and it's making you sick constantly. And she said, that's my profession. I said, Paula, this is your chance to change your profession and build houses for people like me. And it's a growing problem. I'm not the only one who has this problem. There's hundreds of people, and they don't even know what they have. They don't even know what to name it, who have this problem that you could help, and you could help yourself. And so she got so excited about it. Eventually, she always takes a long time to come on board, but eventually she was on board. We take these long walks, and she said, we should do a book together. And so we did. I was the one that told all the stories, and she told the
Okay.
science behind it. And she started getting, after the book came out, it's now in the fourth edition. The fourth edition is fantastic. I didn't contribute I did the foreword, and that's all. But she's taken it to the highest level. The houses are gorgeous, and they make you feel great. It's like being in a forest. You know how you feel in nature? You feel
Yeah.
really calm,
Yeah.
and that's how you feel in her homes now. And she's famous now. And so each book she got more and more knowledgeable, and the final one is like the Bible of healthy house building. Her name is Paula Baker Laporte.
Paula Baker Laporte. Do you remember the name of the book that as it currently
Prescription,
stands?
well, the original name was Prescriptions for a Healthy House.
Okay.
Prescriptions for a Healthy House. And if you or your friends, that's the book to have. I mean, not only does it tell you, basic stuff, it tells you down to the details what kind of mattress to get that's non-toxic. I mean,
Wow.
it is, it tells you everything you need to know, from the foundation to what kind of furniture that's non-toxic.
Wow. I feel very lucky. I mean, it's been a lot of work. I live in a home that's 300 years old, and we have a lot of non-toxic stuff because our foundation is stone. That's I don't know how many, hundreds of millions of years old, and our pipes are all copper.
You
So
are
it's
so lucky. You are so lucky.
but we've got rugs. We have hardwood floors, but we do have some rugs that are likely to be synthetic. So we're in a better situation than a lot of people. But it's certainly something to look into. And I'm always reminded to myself that we're in the 21st century and we have 21st century medicine, but there will be 22nd century medicine and 23rd century medicine, and we will look back upon this era and
We'll
say,
say how primitive we are.
what were we thinking?
What were we thinking?
You
Oh my
know,
God. Oh
eh,
my God.
And it reminds me of the doctor whose name I'm forgetting, who finally was able to show that having physicians wash hands reduce.
Semmelweis.
Yes, and it took him 50 years before it became general
And you
practice.
know,
And so,
he died because, I think he committed suicide or he died from alcohol because he was treated so badly. He was
yeah,
vilified.
he was. He was. And in terms of lifestyle choices, what have you seen that both positive and negative with your patients?
Well, my patients, they all convert because I attract patients who've really suffered and they're
Yeah,
willing to make these changes. I welcome the patients that most doctors can't stand. Doctors
yeah,
can't stand patients with really difficult problems,
right,
complex problems. They're a nuisance because they want to help, they want to give results and stuff, and these people,
right.
and so, but I love getting those kind of patients that nobody else wants because why do I love it? Well, first of all, I love being able to help them because it's so meaningful to me. That's the most important thing. But what I really love is that they're in such bad shape, they're willing to do whatever it takes. And they're willing to make changes that most people, they're so stuck
Right.
in their current eating habits and stuff. The disgusting addictive food from food corporations have kind of really wrecked our health, and
Yeah.
agribusiness has wrecked our health. And yeah, and so they make these changes, and then after a year or so, when they say, I feel better than I ever have in my whole life, do you know what that makes me feel like? It makes me feel so uh, joyful. It makes
Yeah.
me tear up, and I mean, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky I can help people. Because you know what, Mark? When I help people, I'm helping myself. Do you see what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yes. 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 It's
It,
like a spirit of philanthropy in many ways.
it's so fulfilling. It makes
Yeah.
me feel so good, you know?
Yeah.
So I love those difficult cases that nobody wants.
And maybe you could talk about another case or two, or
Okay, I'll
that.
tell you about another case. Okay, so this was a wealthy businessman from Dallas, Texas. And okay, so he called me and said he'd been to the top cardiologist, Cleveland Clinic, UCLA, and Mayo Clinic, and nobody could help him. And, I asked him what his problem was. This is before I asked people to do a big write up. And so that's way more efficient because you
It
don't waste
sure
so much
is.
time. But this
Yeah.
was before that. And so I just sat there asking him a lot of questions and stuff. I said, well, why did you go to see the cardiologist? He said, um, because I had something called tachycardia, which means the heart beats too fast. And they never figured out why. They never even tried to. They just
Yeah.
gave him pills, and he said he couldn't stand the pills because they were beta blockers, and he couldn't have sex, and he had no energy, he couldn't exercise, and he hated the way he felt. And so it was either allowed the tachycardia, which is very stressful. It's always going like this and nonstop. That's
Right.
it's fine for a while, but day after day, that's terrible. That and either that or take the beta blocker and feel like you're, non-functioning. And so he was very despondent and upset. So I this did not take 10 minutes. This took a long time to
Yeah.
get all this. So I said, okay, well, when did you get the rapid heart rate? And he said, well, it was a few years ago and it just got worse. I just thought it would go away and it got worse and worse and worse. I said, um, were you under a lot of stress? And he said, well, I had been under a lot of stress. I started a startup company and that was very
Ooh.
stressful. very
Yeah.
stressful. I said, well, did you have any symptoms then? No. I said, well, that's odd. So he said, yeah, my life was very smooth sailing after that, but I got this tachycardia. I said, okay. I forgot. Let's call him Grant or something. I said, Grant, everything happens for a reason, and we're going to just try and figure out what happened. So, okay, we can rule out stress. Okay. Are you on what medications are you on? He said, well, I'm only on, well, the beta blocker, which I'm not taking, but I'm on the proton pump inhibitor. Do you know what that is? That blocks the acid in your stomach completely.
Okay.
Completely. I said, oh, you, which one? And he told me the name and everything. I said, how long have you been on that? And he said, forever. I said, well, what's forever? And he said, well, when I was stressed out starting a business, I used to get, acid reflux, and it was awful. And so my doctor put me on this acid blocker. It's very potent, by the way, the one he used. And I said, but why are you still on it? Because you're not under stress. You said your life is smooth sailing. So why are you still on an acid blocker? He said, I couldn't get off of it. I said, oh, well, but you're only supposed to really, if you look it up yourself, you're not supposed to stay on it. It's just, because it'll cause trouble. And he said, well, my doctor didn't say anything about getting off of it, that I should, get off of it after 3 months or some. He said, it's fine to just keep taking it. I said, no, it's not fine. He said, well, why isn't it fine? I said, you look it up. Let's look it up together. And so I showed him, I said, look at what it does long term. If it blocks your acid completely from your stomach, do you know what's going to happen? No. You're not going to absorb your minerals, or you're not going to absorb the nutrients in your food. You're going to get the calories. You can get calories, but you're not going to get nutrients.
I mean, it's stopping the stomach from doing its vital function,
I
which
said,
is
how can
dissolving foods.
exactly, Mark? You get it. You should be my assistant. And so I said, this is really unconscionable that you've been left on it. And he said, well, I figured I shouldn't be on it this long. And I tried. I really tried, doctor. I tried to get off of it. Well, what happened? And he said, this terrible surge of acid. I said, that's called rebound. You can't just stop it. You have to stop really slowly, or you'll get in trouble. He said, oh, I didn't know that. I just didn't know that. So I just stayed on it. And I said, okay, here's what I think the problem is, but we've got to prove it. Since you're not getting your minerals, because minerals have to have acid to be absorbed or to be extracted from your food, and protein also. Protein is a string of amino acids, and the acid in the stomach breaks the bonds so you can digest protein. So you're not utilizing your protein either properly. But the heart, there's a mineral that the heart has to have, or it's going to go crazy, and that's magnesium. And so we're going to do a blood test because I want to make sure that we prove everything that I'm saying. So we're going to get a blood test, and we're going to test your minerals. And so he stayed around, and he got a hotel or something, and he stayed around. And so he was here for, I don't know, 10 days or something years ago. And we got the test result. He was low in all of his minerals. And I said, you know what? If you want even more proof of the damage this has caused you, we'll do a bone scan. Usually women get that for osteoporosis because men don't have an osteoporosis problem usually. We're going to get a bone scan for you. And there it was. He had osteoporosis. A man
Wow.
had osteoporosis. And I said, you came to me in the nick of time because, you just end up with, you fall down a little bit, you break your bones. They're so thin. And so anyway, so I designed a program for him, and it was about how to wean off the proton pump inhibitor, the acid blocker, really slowly. It took a year to get off
Oh
of
my
it,
goodness.
but this is
Wow.
what we did while he was doing it. Um, but that doctor was unconscionable to leave him on it, Mark. You know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was unconscionable and shows bad, really bad medicine. And um, so 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 what he did, what I had him do is with each meal he would have apple cider vinegar to make up for it while we're going down. Of course, he eventually didn't need to do that, but I think he stayed on it because he liked it. But anyway, with each meal he had to take apple cider vinegar, and so he could digest his food. And he took the minerals, the supplements at the same time while his stomach was acidified with the apple cider vinegar. And guess what? The heart started to calm down. And these are all these cardiologists, famous cardiologists, who
Wow.
couldn't, you know, help him. So that's one of the stories that's going to go into book
That's a
4.
great story. It just seems so simple, though.
I
Why?
know, I know.
Why?
I know, Mark. That's the whole thing. I'm showing the world you do not have to be a genius to help these people. You have to care about them. You have to have some tools. You have to talk to them. And you have to have an inquiring mind. And that's all it takes. That's all it takes. And oh, so that's going to be one of the stories. And then I write up, about all about acid blockers. So it's an educational thing too,
Yeah.
and so each story will have a discussion, and then yeah, how I figured it out. And it's just common sense. That this is just a
Yeah.
common sense story.
I mean, it is. I mean, one of my favorite lines is that just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy. And I think, particularly in the medical profession, particularly these days, it is simple to listen to people, but it's very hard. I mean, you have, staff that are saying you've got to move on to the next patient, and you're under time constraints. And, maybe I could share the worst doctor experience I ever had was a dermatologist in New York City, and it wasn't any particular big issue, but I waited in his office for over an hour, and he had a very full office. And when he finally came into the room, it literally felt like a pit stop on the Indianapolis 500. The guy was in and out, checking my 90 seconds, if that. And I almost wanted to ask him if he had a gambling problem, if he needed the money, because it just felt like, how can this person be helping me in any way but just dispense pills? I don't remember what the outcome was, except that I said, I'm never going back to this doctor. And to me, that's what's wrong with modern medicine. I mean, it's a larger issue in that, obviously we need more doctors, we need more people in healthcare, and maybe that's, a larger
Guess
symptom
what?
of it.
It's so bad that many doctors are quitting or
Yeah.
retiring early
Yeah.
because they didn't go into medicine to be robots. They
Right.
went in to
Yeah.
really help people. And
Yeah.
once you're in the corporate system, you're forced to be a robot. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's hard
I
to
was
get out.
forced to be a robot. I was a robot, and the chemical injury saved me in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Because
you learn from those bad experiences, as you say.
yeah, yeah. So
And
and so I
maybe go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, maybe you could talk more about your diet.
Okay. Okay, the diet is, unless you have like a house burning down or a massive thing of mold in your house or something, the place to start any healing process is the diet. again, unless you have some emergency situation, you've got to start with the diet. In the early days, people said, "I'll do everything you say, but not the diet." I said, "Well, you forget it." You know, I had a guy say that. I said, "Well, why can't you adopt the diet?" He said, "Well, I don't cook, you know, and I said, "Well, you just hire somebody to cook." So he ended up doing that. He
Wow.
ended up having somebody come and make several meals and freeze them for him, and then he had two non-frozen. So that's how he did it. But you know, some people, like I say, they have to be really sick to make these changes
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it uproots their whole you know, they're addicted to these awful foods. So I tell them, this is what I tell them. I don't say Mediterranean or keto or paleo. I don't do that.
Right.
I say there are certain fundamentals. Number one, your food needs to be organic because we live in very sick times where the food is just covered with glyphosate, and that really destroys our health. Okay, so that's number one. If you can't afford it, go find farmers and buy food directly from the farmers, or find a way, find a way. Number two, get rid of the ultra processed foods, the packaged foods. When you shop on the periphery for all the fresh foods, you eat like a caveman, or like the 1800s or something. You don't eat the chips and the power bars and all that shit. You stay away from that. And some things have to be processed, like olive oil has to be processed. I mean, some things, but the ultra processed foods, they're completely no,
Yeah.
no, no. And then the next one is, if you're going to eat meat, it needs to be from 100% pasture raised animals. The factory farm things are disgusting, and they're immoral, and it's disgusting, and they're unhealthy. The animals, it's just disgusting. And so it has to be like from regenerative farming, or um, the way the Amish raise their animals, or the way they
Right.
did in the 1800s, where you walk around and eat real food and stuff,
Right.
and not grains. And the chickens too. Don't eat chickens unless you know how they're raised, because the marketing thing is a bunch of lies. That you can say they're pasture raised if they have 1 meter by 1 meter. They call that, it's legal to say it's pasture raised. It's just bullshit. And
Yeah.
so you need to know where your chickens come from, and that they're raised like the Amish raise them. They walk around and then they go into the coop at night. And you can tell how the chickens were raised by the eggs. If the eggs are yellow, those are not healthy chickens. The egg yolks need to be orange. That's from eating worms and insects. So that's how you can tell. And so
Ah,
if you're going to
okay.
eat meat, you really need to do it right, or otherwise don't eat animal foods. And then you need to avoid foods that you know are a problem, like gluten is often a problem, and it didn't used to be. And it's a problem now because they hybridized it with good intent. It wasn't evil or anything. They tried to make it more proteinaceous, and in the process caused horrible, you know, autoimmune disease and allergies and sensitivities. And so people often say, how come I can't eat gluten here? I feel awful. I feel tired or bloated or something. And I can go to Europe and eat it because they didn't hybrid. Italy has never hybridized their wheat. And so you can eat all the wheat you want. But in America, you have to watch out for gluten. And you have to avoid the foods you know that you don't tolerate. You must not do it. And then you get sugar out of your life. You can have a little bit of honey or maple syrup, but sugar causes inflammation. And all chronic illness, the foundation of all chronic illness is inflammation. So you don't want things that
Interesting.
feed the fire, and sugar feeds the fire, whether it's cancer cells, whether it's whatever. Sugar is not your friend, and so try to get rid of like simple carbs, cut them down: bread, pasta, crackers, cookies, box cereals, chips, tortillas, and eat complex carbs all you want. That's what they call starch, you know. sweet potatoes, carrots, beets, all the above ground vegetables, the root vegetables, all those are fine. It's the simple carbs because they turn to sugar just like that. They turn to sugar.
Right.
And then the water needs to be filtered because our water is terrible, is terrible. And so you've got to have a good filtration. The ideal one is including reverse osmosis.
Hmm.
But because that strips the water, it strips it completely. And so that's the fundamentals, and then you fine tune it for each person. So it's custom made for that person, but those are just generalities. Does that make sense, Mark?
100%. How about alcohol?
Alcohol, for my patients, is a complete no because two reasons. Two reasons. If you're using it for ceremonial purposes, that's fine. But if you're like, we were taught that, wine for dinner is fine. No, it's not fine. And especially for people who've been injured. Number one, it's metabolized by the liver. It's a toxin. It's a socially acceptable toxin, alcohol.
Hmm.
Number two, alcohol is a sugar. It's a sugar
Right.
alcohol. So
Yeah.
you're creating more inflammation. It's a sugar alcohol. They say, well, what about resveratrol? The skins of grapes. Yeah, that's great, but that doesn't outdo the other harm. Do you see what I mean?
Right. Yes. Yes.
This is worse than the resveratrol. The resveratrol is great, but it's
Right.
not going to cancel out these problems, the liver and the fact that you're doing sugar. You're like
Right.
when I check people's fasting blood sugars, sometimes they say, wow, my fasting blood sugar is so high and I have this great diet. How's that possible? And I said, I know you have a great diet. Let me think. You don't eat desserts. No, don't eat desserts. Did you have alcohol? Yes, that's what it does because it's sugar.
Wow.
Makes your blood
Wow.
sugar go like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Of course, I'm sure you're up with the news, particularly on the health-related piece with alcohol, and there used to be guidance 2 drinks per men per night, and now they're saying that the Surgeon
It,
General is
it,
saying there should be a warning on
it,
alcohol.
there, it takes everything so long. I was saying that 30 years ago, but again, I had to be injured to really understand all
Yeah.
these things. So I don't pass judgment, but it's about time because okay, why does it could potentially promote cancer? It's because it's sugar and cancer cells. Okay, so it doesn't cause cancer. No, you can't say that. It helps cancer grow. Does that make sense,
Right.
Mark?
Right.
You can't say it
Yes.
causes cancer. Just like, um, dairy products have growth hormones. And even if you grow the cow and sheep or goat in your backyard, it still has growth hormones because it has to, when it's, I don't know, what's the word, breastfeeding for animals? What's it called? When they're lactating, it
Right.
helps the calf grow into a cow. So a cancer patient should never do dairy because the growth hormone stimulates, but dairy does not cause cancer. No, it does not. But if
Right.
there are cancer cells, especially the hormone related ones like prostate and breast and ovaries, cancer is a no. I mean, dairy is a no-no. Does that make sense?
Wow. It does. Maybe I can ask a question by way of telling a joke. And it's probably a joke that you've heard before as a doctor. And it's one that I heard actually in church years ago from a priest. And so this middle-aged guy goes to see his doctor for his checkup. And he says, Doctor, I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't gamble. I don't eat meat. No sugar. No salt. I go to bed early. I wake up early. How long do you think I have to live? And the doctor says, what the hell do you want to live for? And so, and
No,
so,
but my
how do you
patients,
balance?
my patients love the way they feel. When they
Yeah,
really do it, they so love it that they
yeah,
don't want to give it up. Once
yeah,
they're really in the groove and their addictions have passed, they're through withdrawal and all that stuff, and they've got a routine, they don't want to go to the old way. They don't want
yeah,
it anymore because they feel
yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
And by the
Yeah.
way, salt, the medical system is so mixed up. The salt, as long as it doesn't have aluminum in it and all that stuff that keep it from to flow and all that stuff, as long as it's sort of pure salt, like Himalayan pink sea salt and stuff like that, salt is fine unless you have a salt problem. And
Right.
I mean, the stuff we learn is so messed up. It's so messed up.
I mean, it's so true. And, sugar is one thing that even before this conversation, I'm like, yeah, I need to reduce my sugar intake. And it's still, I mean, I have a little tiny, I don't know, half a teaspoon in my coffee, but, maybe it's worth switching to honey and,
If you do a half a teaspoon and that's all you do during the day,
well, there's more to it than that, but it builds up, and I've had a sweet tooth throughout my life, but I am thinking about that it is it's almost fermenting in my body in a way, and feeding that sugar as so yeah. I'm constantly working on it and thinking of ways where, what can I do for my body and my family, and to make sure that we're all in good health, and
yeah, you'd be a good role model for your family.
I'm we're trying, and it's a tough one. It's a tough
I
one.
know, but I'll give you something that might motivate you. It's a horrible statistic, so get ready.
Let's
So,
hear it.
and you can look this up yourself too, so it's not just me
Yeah.
spouting off something. So there's graphs comparing. Okay, so I'll tell you one graph that I saw. Um, and it's the 37 wealthiest countries in the world, and it was about healthcare. And the cost of healthcare, we were up here, astronomically high, and number two was down here, Germany, and then all the others. So we had the
Right.
most expensive healthcare. And
Yes.
in terms of
Yes.
results, in terms
Not
of results,
not so great.
we were at the bottom. And
Yeah.
now here's something that's even worse, what I'm going to say. So when I was in med school, it was um, about 6% of the population had one or more chronic conditions. Now it's 53% have one or more. And now it's not the 37 wealthiest countries. We're the sickest nation in the world.
Wow.
I
And
mean, with chronic conditions, I'm talking about one or more chronic conditions.
and why, well, largely, why do you think that is? I mean, we've touched
To
upon
me,
it.
it's totally clear. I
Yeah.
don't even have to think 2 seconds about it because I've thought about it for 40 years. I've been thinking about this. Our food is terrible. It's not healthy, our food. It's really terrible what most people eat. It's terrible. Number two, we don't regulate toxins very well. We're terrible compared to the EU. Terrible what we allow. That's
Sure.
totally poisonous. We have pesticides on everything. The wind blows it everywhere. Even organic food gets some of the wind blown
Sure. Yeah.
glyphosate. Um, Number four, we're workaholics. We don't get enough sunshine. We don't get enough exercise, and yeah, and we're very toxic. We're very, very, very toxic.
Yeah. And we recently banned, or in the process of phasing out, where was it, red number 40, and various food
Number
dyes.
three, but we've got
Number three.
that's just a
There's so
drop.
many of them. There's yellow
That's
number 5 and
I
blue
know
number. Yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
a drop in the bucket, and it
It
gets all
is.
this
It
news. It
is.
gets all this
Yeah.
news, and it's just
Yeah.
one of many.
Yeah, yes, but there does need to be more, and whatever people's personal feelings are on regulations. It's a lot different when you're talking about financial systems versus human health, and
It's where are your priorities? It's
where
where
are and so a bank regulation versus what people are putting into their bodies. I America will be just fine if we remove all of the artificial food dyes, the companies will survive. People will still eat Fruit Loops or whatever the the product is that people are harping on these days. But that is an issue, that our chemicals are just under-regulated in the United States, and I hope it's something that does change, and it needs to change. And until then, we've got to be our own best advocates and know what to avoid.
Yeah, I tell my patients, you know, you don't have to be political, but just do what it takes to make yourself healthy. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, because if you go in that direction and think all the cards are stacked against us, you'll never just focus on getting well.
What
That's
you
what I
can
say.
do.
What
Yeah.
you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on caffeine, coffee? I know your uncle was a proponent of coffee enemas.
Yeah, I'm not though. But but I mean, I that never caught on with me, and so I tried it, but no, I have other ways. But you remember he was operating um almost 60 years ago, 55 years ago,
Yeah.
and so it was pretty good for that long ago. But now things have changed, and um so what do I think about um
Caffeine in general,
okay, caffeine in
coffee.
general. Okay, here's what I think. Here's what I think. It has some real benefits if it's taken in moderation,
Yeah.
if in moderation. And some people can't even do it at all because of reflux. And so you have to tune in and where am I at with coffee? Is the benefit is it beneficial or is it hurting my stomach, my esophagus? So it's an individual thing, but I'm generalizing now that a small amount of coffee, like one a day or two a day at the most, is actually beneficial. It has a lot of benefits. However, it needs two things that you need to be a smart buyer when you buy coffee. Number one, it needs to be free of pesticides. So you need to have an idea of where it's grown, how it's grown. You need to really know where your food comes from. And number two, almost all coffee is full of mold. How can I say such a radical thing? Is because think about where it grows. It grows in
Right.
humid climates and they
Yes.
store it in warehouses. So there's three companies that I know of, like Bulletproof and Life Boot or something like that, and one other one that buys it directly when it's harvested. So it's not in a warehouse, it's mold free, it's tested, and they don't use pesticides. And so most people are drinking mold,
Wow.
and so even you say, well, it's organic, but that's not good enough.
Organic mold.
Yeah, it's organic. It's organic mold. It's never been sprayed. So, so then you can drink in peace and know that you're doing actually a good thing, unless your stomach says otherwise. If your
Yeah.
stomach is sort of tender afterwards, you really shouldn't do it. And so you be the judge. But if you do it in moderation, it's actually good.
My last guest on the show was a midwife, and there has been a lot of both anecdotal and my life and empirical evidence of fertility issues. And have you seen that affect your patients over the course of your career?
Fertility issues from coffee.
Yes. No, just in general.
Oh yeah, fertility's gone way down. It's gone
Yeah.
way down. And it seems like that makes sense because um, I've known about in history when a race of people are in distress, not necessarily from food, but in distress, just any distress, the fertility rate goes down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, some of
that's
it.
historic, yeah.
some of it has been attributed to aging parents, but then also these forever chemicals. And my understanding is that there have been issues with fertility in farm animals, which, if it were solely related to human beings, then it could be attributed to, older parents. But clearly, in farm animals, that's a constant.
Okay, so I think toxins are playing a big role, frankly.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
because, okay, look, here's something to think about. Unfortunately, many of the toxins like pesticides, glues, paint, solvents, all those things, they are estrogen mimickers, and they affect men too because of the prostate. But estrogen mimickers mess up your hormones. They're not estrogens. They're hormone mimickers, meaning if you test for estrogen, you'll only get tested for your own body's estrogen. You can't test for these hormone mimickers, but they really screw you up. They really screw you up in terms of fertility.
Well, to bring it all back home to the very beginning, what would your advice be for people considering a career in medicine? And would you advocate for folks who come from a path like yours, which was very nonlinear? And what are your thoughts on that?
I think it has to be an individual thing, but I think modern medicine, unless you're a surgeon or something, or you're a brilliant specialist in something, it's not rewarding. It's not
Yeah.
rewarding. And I tell them to go be a naturopath or a health coach or something, and or be a physician's assistant, but practice on your own in your own according to your own belief systems. But going through the medical system, like, wow, I don't know. It took my soul away. It took my
Yeah.
soul away. Yeah.
And my understanding is that you practice out of your home.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Wow.
My patients love coming here because so many patients are saying, "You're the only doctor I'm excited about going to see. I'm not excited about anyone." And because they smell soup cooking, I don't
Right.
wear a white coat, they had take off their shoes, and it's a very lots of plants. It's a very friendly setting with the glass doors looking out onto a lovely garden.
Oh,
They
wow.
feel relaxed. All the anxiety that people have going to doctors, like fear and anxiety, they
Sure.
don't have that. And I hear it's so touching. I hear so often people say, I feel so much better. And it doesn't mean that I did anything. They just feel their anxiety dissipates, you know.
That's great. And so what is your staff like? Is it just you or do you
It's
have
just me.
wow.
I don't want paperwork. I don't want to do insurance. I want to just give of myself. I don't want, just to be a businesswoman. I don't want that. I want to
Yeah.
be, I work all the time, but thank God I love what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how can people find out more about you and your books?
Okay, so there's several. I have a book platform. It's ericaelliottmd.com. Did you get a chance to look at that?
Oh, yes.
Oh gosh. Gosh, Mark,
I do my homework.
I'm so impressed with you. And then I have blogs, and oh, this is what your listeners might like. The blog is called Musings, Memoir, and Medicine, all one word, Musings with an S. And what they might like is the fact that there's a category called medicine, and so it's different things, travel, with my grandchildren stuff, but there's a whole category on medicine, and I wrote each one for a patient who wanted to see me, and I was overflowing with patients. I had 1,200 patients, and that's just one person. And so
Yeah.
I felt so bad to turn them away. I just asked them what their problem was, and I said, what I'm going to do is write a blog post about your problem, and then not only, will you have a lot of the questions answered, but all these other people have the same thing. So
Right.
so each one was written for a person, like the mammogram ones, the cholesterol ones, the statin ones, and it's not what you learn from mainstream medicine.
Yeah, yeah. And the name of that, your blog, the website for that?
Musings, Memoir, and Medicine.com. Musings with an S. Musings, Memoir, and Medicine.com.
And that's also on, I think there's a link to that on your website, EricaElliottMD.com
Yes,
as
there's a
well.
link to it.
Okay.
And be sure to click the medicine part. Don't get lost in all the travel and stuff like that.
Right.
Go for the medicine, because you'll learn stuff your doctor won't tell you about because they don't know.
Right. And I always say you got to be your own advocate, and
Yeah.
do research and read and really think about your own life, and you have to be the person that's listening to yourself in a way I think that you do for others, and ask those questions and dig deep, and I think we all
You
have
really,
things
you
that
know what? I really feel understood by you. You know?
I mean, I am the same way in that I feel like sometimes you do need to ask the question and then ask it again, maybe in a different way. And I find it doing it to myself that some of it is being not honest with yourself. Some of it is just not thinking it. But if you ask the question maybe a third, even a fourth time, it unlocks an answer that may not have been there, and that people by nature are too quick to say, "Oh, it's nothing." And it's not that they're being deceitful. It's just that it's just our means for quickly coming to a conclusion, where sometimes it's not always quite that simple, and that you need to peel away another layer and
Yeah,
another layer
that's
until you
that's so
see,
true.
oh
What you're saying.
yeah, yeah,
That's
I
so
mean,
true. Could have figured it out. The thing is that the corporate medicine can't even ask those questions, and you could have figured it out yourself. You see what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And
yeah,
you're not a doctor. But you would have figured it out. You totally get it. It's nice to be understood. Thank you.
Well, Erica, it's been a pleasure, and thank you very much for being on the show. And EricaElliottMD.com. Check it out, and please read the books, and be healthy.
Oh.